Thank you, Deanna. I'm very excited to introduce Jill. She was part of the team that created the Shift, which is um, a holistic harm reduction, uh, basically format to help people that with intellectual disabilities who have been marginalized, who are at risk due to addictions, poverty, intergenerational trauma, gender, and race. So it's a team that's in northeastern Ontario, and part of the shift is also a training that's available, a module. So I'm very excited to hear about it because I know in Toronto, this is something that we often see. So I'll let Jill kind of provide maybe a bit more information on that since she knows much more about it than I do. Go
Okay,
ahead, Jill.
great. Thank you, everybody, for having me today. I actually have my partner in crime, friend, colleague, guru, just overall great guy with me today, Justin Wood. And I'll let him introduce himself in a second. So I come from Northern Ontario. I'm up in North Bay, which is, if you're actually from Northern Ontario, not considered North. We're like, you got to make it up to Cochrane. To be northern, because there's a big group up there. But I have worked and collaborated with all those groups. And yeah, so back in 2020, we got a small group together and started really thinking and looking at this issue in regards to people with intellectual disabilities who were also facing addictions and maybe some other intersecting issues, like you said, such as poverty and such. And that's because I was working as a complex case manager at the time. These were people who were coming into my caseload. And I was finding out, of course, that the service coordination for them and the getting them out there was challenged by several barriers due to discrimination and lack of services. So I grabbed some people and said, I think, would we like to change this? And here we are several years later, hopefully making change across the province and even across provinces. So Saskatchewan actually has had us out there to talk about the shift too, and are very involved in that piece. I have a long history in developmental services, back 33 years, lots of different roles. I'm a director right now with Community Living North Bay. But most of my time has been, spent with people who might have that label of complex, presenting as complex needs and such. Even back to, I spent all my time in my 20s helping people deinstitutionalize. So that was our first wave of people that I think there was a lot of fear and bias against at that time. So I see a lot of parallels actually to what's happening now to what happened back in the 90s. I will introduce you to Justin Wood, and he will give you a little background of maybe how he got involved and why he's here today to talk about such an important thing. Go ahead, Justin.
Good morning, Jill. You look lovely this morning. I
Oh,
just
thank
thought
you.
I'd throw that down. Also, forgive me. I live in the mountains of British Columbia, so my internet connection is not always the most stable. So just, Jill, throw it out there to me if it's glitching, just so I know where to kind of pick up.
Sorry. Gotcha.
Um, yeah, my name is Justin Wood. I'm here because for 23 years I was a drug addict. I spent a number of years on the street. I was spent 16 years with a needle. And my whole drug addiction began because I had an inability to process emotions and emotional traumas. And I think that's very common for many individuals to choose a form of distraction, to figure out a way to mask symptoms for a language that they do not have. And along my journey, I had to go on a journey of self-discovery in a very difficult way. But 4 years ago, I got out of jail, and I got out of jail homeless with nothing. But when I was in jail, I decided to ask myself, what love was. And I realized that I never loved myself, and I realized that no one had ever taught my parents how to love themselves, so I was never given that education, which is why I began distracting in the first place from who I was and creating an identity to pretend to be someone I wasn't. And the drugs helped me create that identity very well. And this is very common within mental health and addiction. We create identities to display for other people so we can be accepted by other people for who we're not. And then we begin to practice that. So I did that very well for 23 years. And, you know, I came from a good home, but the inability to process that energy that was stored inside of me had me reach for something stronger that would help me mask that symptoms. And because I didn't have a language to talk about how I was feeling, because in our society we struggle to process emotions, many of us create patterns and behaviors that are not good for us. You know, and addiction is far more than drug addiction. It's social media, it's video games, it's food, it's porn, it's reading, it's work, it's anything that's distracting the human from going within. So I decided to go on a journey within and ask myself what love was for self, and I became a student of love 4 years ago. And I transformed my entire life using an understanding of seeking this thing called love, this power, this energy that I couldn't find a teacher for on this planet. So I had to do this work myself. And, you know, here we are 4 years later. I have 2 companies. I have a beautiful wife. But the thing that I'm most grateful for is the ability to cultivate this love and live in this practice for myself. So I realized the power of it, and I didn't do like abstinence-based recovery where I would just avoid, because many of us just avoid our problems in life. You don't have to be an addict to be avoiding problems. This is very common for many of us. I process and address in the moment. And because my life was so difficult, stepping up into difficult areas has become a gift, you know, to be able to do that in my life. And being a part of the shift is a wonderful thing because I shifted my whole mindset. You know, I taught myself a whole new behavior. I tell everyone quitting the drugs is easy when you're ready. Putting your life back together is the most difficult part. And that's for anyone. You know, you don't have to be a drug addict to be rewiring your brain to understand who you are, because that's what I did is I learned about who I was. But I had to do it on my own. I had to do it with nothing. Over the course of that 23 years, I was in and out of programs. I actually wasn't in the programs, but I was usually staying with a girl or someone who was. So I met a lot of you people like yourselves that are in this group today. And a lot of what helped me understand that love was a real thing was people showed me kindness and compassion along my way. And they saw me as a human being, even though they didn't know me. And that stays with you. So to talk about kindness, to talk about compassion, to talk about gratitude and energy and understanding our boundaries and our space through an avenue of love is why I'm here and why I'm a part of the Shift training program with Jill. And Jill is someone to me that is just, she's a change maker. You know, she thinks outside the box. She thinks from her heart. She's not afraid to speak her truth, which I absolutely love about her. And that's everything that I am as well. I'm authentic. And we do this thing from a place of love. And I think that that's what the world needs right now. But it's cultivating these conversations and taking action within it that really sets the bar for change. And me, I'm all about results, and Jill is as well. And, you know, I can understand and appreciate working in the government sector is no easy thing, and we can all appreciate that as well. But I'm here to do what I can to try and help that out. So for me, if you have questions like along the way or whatever, just, you know, don't hold back, because 23 years of a very, very difficult journey gains you a wealth of knowledge in very difficult areas. So please don't be shy anywhere along the way. Thanks, Jill.
Awesome. Thank you for setting us up for the morning, Justin. Really appreciate it. So I got a bit of a slideshow. I'm gonna get it going. It just helps me keep focused here and present some stuff to you guys. I'm gonna get it up on the screen, and we're all gonna be, cross our fingers that I can get it done right. Usually I do. All right, just give me a second. Okay, we'll do it. I don't have my notes, so I'm totally winging it, but I've done this a couple of times, so I think it's all good. And I'm very passionate about the shift. So like I said, the shift really got going back in 2020. And it all starts with me being a case manager and having 2 real people, 2 women who are on my caseload who I am really struggling with the barriers and really how to support these ladies. I'd had some success back in 2015, helping a gentleman who we're going to hear that story today, who was at that time suffering from an alcohol addiction. But the ladies who I met up with in 2020 were actually before then. It was actually 2018. And then, of course, then COVID hit and everything went crazy in 2020. But were suffering from both crack and meth addictions. And what I was finding was, of course, a lot of barriers, a lot of discrimination that was going on. And so I asked a group of people to get together and say, like, how can we change this? Like, first of all, is everyone else noticing that, you know, this is an issue? What I was finding was that developmental services, there seemed to be no place for them. And then in addiction services or rehab or what was traditionally out there, there seemed to be no place for them. And then people were dying. And I was really concerned because like I said, been in developmental services for over 30 years. And I'd never been part of such a cohort where they were so marginalized and so biased against and so discriminated against, that it kind of called me to action. So I'm going to share a little video about what the shift is. And while I've got the video on, I was hoping if you guys could maybe put in the chat, if you could put in the chat your names and then your work title and maybe the agency that you work at. I'm kind of interested where you're all from. And if you could do that while we're watching this video. And I'm hoping I clicked off the share sound. Someone's going to tell me if they don't hear the sound.
Every day, we aim to improve lives and give people hope. We are invested in our work, and we leave it all on the table. But what if there was a way we could do even better? Something so simple but so effective that it can help us gain a deeper understanding of the people we serve.
What our
All right.
job is to educate, inform, and offer understanding as best as possible.
Welcome to The Shift. Built on 4 principles: humility, awareness, sensitivity, and safety. The Shift is a collection of best practices curated from the front lines for all of us to share. It can change the way we work together, reduce harm, and even save lives.
With empathy and with good listening comes better understanding. If we need to meet people where they're at and not draw a line in the sand for them.
People's quality of life, their definition of that doesn't necessarily match our definition of quality of life.
Harm reduction isn't all or nothing. Even small changes to how we work can reap huge rewards for the people we are charged with caring for.
Just because a person has a disability does not suddenly give us the right to be accountable for their actions.
So everybody should be able to make choices, informed choices, and that's where our role comes in.
The Shift is here. It's evidence-based and simple to implement.
And if and when they fall, that's where we're there to support again. Non-judgmental and just start anew.
And it all starts with us.
All right, I'll just stop sharing for a second because I want to see who's here. And I can't, for some reason, open the chat box without looking at that. So we're just going to toggle back and forth. All right, so who's here? We've got a crisis counselor, family support coordinator. I've got Coda, Corbrook, Montage, so very familiar. We got a Jill here, not many Jills around. Hey, Jill. Thank you for putting some of that in there. So just quick a show of hands while I've got most of you on the screen. Who does or has spent time supporting people in their role, whatever that might be, whether it's a resource role or a direct support worker role or even in leadership. But who has supported people who are living with an addiction or just drug use, because that's another one, and intellectual disability. So Awesome. We're going to have a good conversation today. Fabulous. Okay. So, yeah. Why don't I ask you another question then? Because Justin and I really like interaction and really makes our day go better. So since you all have had that experience, because sometimes we'll get into groups, say Justin, and maybe a half of the people haven't. So this is like really new to them. So it sounds like a lot of you've had some experience. So tell me, what are some of the barriers that you guys have encountered in trying to support people with addiction or drug use within our services, within our community? Tell me what some of those barriers that you've encountered. Don't be afraid. Karen, do you have your hand up because you just have your hand up, or you want to talk?
Like accessing housing,
And why is accessing housing a barrier?
because they won't be able, as soon as they are identified as having anything that is not going to be okay around like a family, right? They were like, nope, this is it is a stereotype, right? I have experienced where I'm going to landlords and it's that first 2-3 minutes that where we're talking, and I said, like, let's just talk, not look at each other, right? And it's
Yep.
that those conversations, it's one of the difficult things that I've seen.
Real world difficulty. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Adam?
I couldn't be more grateful to be here right now. I was just going through something recently where, and I'll maintain as much confidentiality as is due, but where someone who was contending both with some issues of potentially intellectual developmental disability and some addiction issues was in a situation where they had to interact with law enforcement. In this situation, you know, much like Justin was saying recently about how we seek other tools because we don't have the language to express what we're feeling. When an individual lacks the conventional means for self-advocacy, if they don't have someone standing by on their behalf, they're getting mistaken for hostile. They're getting presumed degree of criminality or a presumed degree of resistance that is not present when a person is seeking help. So glad to be here to learn how to add to that advocacy and that opportunity for greater self-articulation.
Absolutely. So definitely barriers within those front lines of our judicial system. And I know, of course, there's barriers all through the judicial system in regards to that, in regards to being in court. And then we added some intersection of someone who's Indigenous. And then we actually see worse outcomes in court, which is interesting, even with, you know, the opportunities out there. Darian, if I'm saying that correct.
Yep. Thank you so
Okay.
much. So I would just say for me and the team that I support, again, back to the housing point, we are constantly working with administrators who've been in their positions for many decades, who they not even addiction, they look at all consumption as being bad, abstinence. It's not even, so the minute you bring up anything, it's no to services. They don't, in the developmental sector, with a broad paintbrush. I mean, not everyone is the same, but they don't recognize the individuals we support as sexual beings, as individuals who you should have relationships. We do have very few, in my opinion, people who are continuing trying to bust the doors down with those fallacies. Deanna Jost being the biggest one, in my opinion. If it wasn't for her, I don't even know how the conversation would even get going. So we refer to her all the time. So for me, it's really around the administration, people who've been in these positions for so long. Sometimes the younger folks are a little more open-minded, but there's so much pressure on them to say no to services, to provide services for our individuals.
Yeah, a lot of we don't do that. That's specialized. And I think what hurt me the most was our own DS services saying, we don't do that. They're not welcome here. I was like, what?
And we have a provincial government. Sorry, it'll be the last thing I
Yeah,
say, I promise. So we
yeah.
have a provincial government. I'm not being political. I'm just putting it out there as to
Oh,
why this
we mix around in it. It's okay, Darian. Go ahead.
yeah, so why it continues, we have a provincial government who clearly does not appreciate or even want harm reduction resources anywhere near anybody. And so it just continues to perpetuate this belief that this is just really bad. It's just,
Yeah, I didn't realize when I got into this that harm reduction, of course, was going to become political fodder, and that they were going to be sound bites for politicians that were going to like destroy the messaging and the love we were trying to send. And somehow we're knee deep in it, and definitely new ground for me. But I have hope for all the people who are doing the work. So, Pranal,
Can you hear me?
yes, we can.
Awesome. Yeah, I've observed a lot of stigma around access to healthcare. When someone with an addiction goes to a hospital, they are treated very differently. They are looked at like they are less than by nurses and doctors. Yeah, so as Adam mentioned, there's a clear link for people to associate drug use and criminality, which is something that we are trying to break.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Justin, I don't know if you want to mention your experiences of healthcare systems for someone who experienced a lot of major, near deaths. How does the healthcare system treat someone who almost died?
Yeah, along the journey, I had 33 overdoses. So, you spending enough time with fentanyl and opiates, you learn a few things. But the most interesting thing, yeah, is being chucked into the healthcare system where you think that you're going to be a human because you're a part of a community, and you're treated less than, you're just told grab your shit and get out after you just woke up from an overdose off the street. And I realized that using substances, to mask these symptoms of pain that I don't know how to speak about is not acceptable by society's manner, but yet you're looked at in this way is just unacceptable. But what I was going to say to Pranal is your voice, your truth, speak your truth. If you're there and you're coming into these systems and you're advocating for one of your clients, your truth, your voice is the most powerful thing that all of us possess. So never underestimate the tool of your voice. It may not be heard in the moment, but the energy that's distributed from your passion is enough to begin change. Those frequencies change. They change more than just the moment. They change the experience for the individuals that's there, and that's lasting. I was also going to say to Darian about the provincial government, that this is obviously a problem and has been a problem for the last 100 years. But the only thing that can really come up against this within these sectors, within life in itself, is our collection of voices. This has always been the answer, is our connection of voices, because the louder we get, the harder it is to ignore. And I realize that in these sectors, it's difficult to do that because we have people that have been in these situations for so long, and they're just trying to get to the land of retirement. They don't want to change. And the younger people are getting pressurized by these people to conform to this same method of
Oh, he froze. Justin, you're frozen, but you look serious. He always says he's going to have trouble, and he never does. So this is the first time. But what a wonderful supportive group to do this. I just, Tammy, if you want to go ahead, and Justin will pop back on.
Yeah, if he pops back in, I'll let him finish. One of the barriers I've often found was even just being able to connect with that person. They have no phone. There's no way to actually reach them. Like, it's the basic thing. If you don't have that, you're not able to really help that person. And so we often try to find some sort of workaround, a community center or a community program that they went to, or something. So I think it's just, just being able to actually connect with the person, and it's just so hard. And I
Yeah.
see a bunch of things in the chat, Jill.
I'm going to
Yeah.
talk about those, actually. Yes.
Okay.
That's what I wanted to mention. Justin, it's okay. Did you want to finish your thought, or? Okay, so a couple of things. So lots about housing, and we're going to talk about housing in a second, because there's some like core evidence-based ideas that we bring to the shift And one of them is about housing first. And so we're going to talk about housing. Access to developmental service-based housing. No kidding. Don't want, can't have someone who's smoking marijuana, with a nice young lady who has Down syndrome. I mean, that sounds, and I think it was, I think Darian who mentioned like these traditional models that in kind of services. And I'm traditional. I'm in my 50s. I've been around through it all, through that. And I still think that there's so much room for us to grow. Capacity of services. Someone talked about the, and this is kind of the myths that we talk about, that people think that adults with intellectual disabilities are still children. So how many of you heard this type of comment? How can you let, which is, really upsets me as soon as I hear that. How do you let a person who has an intellectual disability and the mind of a 9-year-old go out and use crack? How can you let them do that? So what's the first reaction? I don't let anybody do anything. I'm actually not in control. So there's the first myth, right? Especially our partner services. So the shift was about not just speaking to developmental services, because that was the group I really wanted to implore. But then I was like, hey, why do you think we're the caretakers or somehow the security guards of people who our whole shtick has been about people being part of their community, removing barriers, putting ourselves out of a job, not, creating more stigma and more areas for the communities to think, oh, they need to be taken care of. So I'm always fighting that in regards to with medical doctors, families, and just our community partners. The police are perplexed. Like, why don't you put them in a group home and lock them up like you do with those other ones, and I'm just being frank, and I hope that doesn't, hurt anybody's feelings, but those are the real messages that I hear all the time. And then one of the other messages I've heard when we talk about people in traditional and senior roles, and I needed to hear all these because this is how we approach the shift then, by understanding where these barriers are. I'd have executive directors when I would, try to do my elevator pitch about the shift to them, and they'd say, Jill, we don't want anybody dying in our services. These people die. And I was just, I was happy that they gave me the truth, that was the fear, but also kind of shocked that, again, the dignity of life is not like the present kind of thought. They're worried about the liability of someone dying. So definitely, I'm just like leading through some of the messages. People are really frustrated. I can see that. Yeah, access to rehab centers and, how do we, because those are the only methods of treatment. We'll talk a little bit about that. And yeah, so many services saying we're just not geared to that. We don't know how to help someone like that. And I'll tell you, when we talk about like raising our voices, I try to use, tools that are already out there. So the Ontario, the Act for Accessibility for Ontarians, if you read that, it basically says you are not allowed to discriminate against someone because of their disability. You have to provide service. And if you go right into, and I'm going to do a quote about our Ontario human rights, you can't say like zero policies, like we don't provide service to people with addictions, like unless you can really prove why you can't provide those services, as in it causes like do harm kind of thing. So those are some of the things I'm more confident in having conversations with people now when they try to present restrictions or barriers to people accessing service. I just, kind of politely bring up, so, how are you meeting the needs under the Ontario for, Accessibility Act? And how can I help you with that? And I think that's the other part of our role for those of us who want to change, is that we can't just sling rocks. We can't just say, boy, you're doing it wrong. We have to say, this is how we can help. Developmental Services is good at that. We have been out there community connecting for 30 plus 40 years. We are good at this. And, I'm kind of like building on our strengths within that. So I'm just going to get us back to the slideshow. and do a couple other slides here. Any comments from that? Anything else before I move forward?
Jill.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer. I'm from Surrey Place.
Hey, Jennifer.
Hi. I totally will follow the podcast, Justin. I love finding new podcasts, so super excited to check it out. And I think as a manager, I think there's a few of us on this call. I think it's also trying to figure out how to find resources to support people within our portfolio and staff that are going to be working with people with substance use to kind of navigate through that. I think is also something that I struggle with sometimes, supporting people in the north that the clinical supports are working through substance use, working through kind of substance use during clinical meetings and that kind of thing. So I think leadership as well, getting support is something I'm interested in.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. And what we'll see in the next little bit here in our time together, we're going to go through these evidence-based practices that are already exist. A lot of what was developed with the shift was developed with Tina Thomason, and you're going to see her later in the presentation. And Tina Thomason was a manager of the Network of Specialized Care up here in the north. She worked at our clinical group HANDS, the Family Help Network. But more importantly, actually, before she got into that work, she spent 25 years working with addiction services alongside a family doctor who specialized in addiction. So when Tina kind of brought all of the tools that were already, again, evidence-based practice from the addiction side or the drug use side, and we brought all the developmental service evidence-based practices like person-centeredness, and we brought that together, we realized, wow, this could be really powerful. And these are the tools that anyone can access and work upon to help people. And really help people. And we've demonstrated that through our work up here in the north. So Adam, go ahead, and then I'll talk a little bit about this slide. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask regarding the kind of infantilization that got brought up recently. Now I've been in a number of situations where you're encountering someone who's trying to take on this third-party voice for someone and saying, I think she wants X, our or my objective for X, right? So what I've started doing when I can is to say, oh, when were you appointed the substitute decision maker for this person? So that when they say I wasn't, then I could say, okay, well then it's my mandate to have to speak with the client and let them express what they want. But I'm very, very open to any and all other tips, tools, and strategies that can be applied to remove that false sense of SDM-ership or that false sense of caretaker guardian. So I just wanted to throw that out there while we were on that I have a few little tools, but I really need to expand this. So.
Well, and you know what, you're working against years of us, like, because I've worked in developmental services so long, where we would ask the families to sign everything, like sign consent that this person can go to the pool every Sunday, and so we're trying to move away from that because we know it's not right. But again, you've got like all this history and all this, the way we were kind of functioning in services, that becomes kind of an expectation over time. So I appreciate what you're trying to do. And, often it's, providing a carrot instead of a stick, right? Like, how do we help people learn what their roles are and that they are there to support family? Connection is very important when we're talking about this issue. And it's our role to not, put any barriers into connections for people. But yeah, really appreciate that, Anna. So we know there are people, this is the other myth and misconception. When I first started running around talking about this, people are like, I don't think this is a very big problem. They'd be like, no, I don't think very many people with intellectual disabilities are doing drugs. In fact, when I presented at the CLO several years ago, I think it was 2021, one of the comments was that, absolutely, this is such a small cohort that we probably shouldn't need to put any focus on it and just let the addiction services kind of take care of it. And I knew that wasn't right based upon the people that I was meeting, and the conversations I was having with people like you. So what's fascinating is kind of from, we see a lot of uptick in papers being published around the intersection of intellectual disability and substance use, kind of like 2012, 2015, they really start to ramp up. And I encourage you guys to go out there and like do a couple of Google searches for them. This is one of them. And, you know, as it says, you know, individuals with intellectual disabilities are an expanding population that confronts multiple disadvantages from social and environmental determinants of health. Why? Well, deinstitutionalization and community integration have improved those lives. However, they have access, right? They have the same risks in front of them that anyone else would in their community. And then we tag on these, again, disadvantages, environmental determinants, them being treated as children, so they're not educated properly in regards to this. And then, you know, the basics of what, you know, Justin is telling us and reminding us of, that this is all about love and connection and understanding oneself. So if you're a person who's already marginalized, who's being told who they are by other people, we can really see how this is a compounding factor for people. I really encourage you guys to take a shot at this. So this is a study that was done in 2016 by HCARD, the Healthcare Access Research and Developmental Disabilities, right here in Ontario. They looked at statistics across Ontario through, you know, access to healthcare and such. And I think they were quoting around somewhere between a 6 to 9% of people with intellectual disabilities who'd been diagnosed with a substance use disorder. And that is still a small group because not everyone gets that diagnosis. And of course, on top of just substance use disorder or addiction, we just have drug use too. That is part of the issue of what we're trying to support people with. So the legalization of marijuana, of course, has really changed the landscape and what that looks like. But this is a really good report. It probably will validate everything that you guys have encountered if this is the work that you're doing. And it's homegrown right here in Ontario. So it really speaks to the issues that they encountered in doing this research. Really well done. So based on like you guys, what you were saying, like what the barriers are, myths and misconceptions, you know, things that frustrate us, we got together as a group in the North, and we actually had some partners in this. We had a professional marketing and PR group called Clark Communications, along with a journalist actually who's out of Sudbury, who herself had a disability. And so she was really passionate about helping us, you know, develop the right language and the toolkit that is available on our website for everybody on the Shift Training website. So what were we trying to do? So we're trying to provide evidence-based approaches to working with people with developmental intellectual disabilities that are not being met. We want to offer some new concepts, and we're going to talk about those. We want to encourage community partners to see people with developmental disabilities through a holistic lens again, and that's all been part of our jobs for years. You know, we want to encourage dialogue. And so part of the shift in the Shift training is actually one module is for our cross-sector partners. And we're like, you know, can you just take this module and learn a bit about people with intellectual disabilities, you know, our services, and kind of understand where we are in supporting them. We want to offer opportunities for long-term learning and critical self-reflection. This work seems to come with a ton of critical self-reflection. We have to move past our own biases, our values. We have to like address them. And then there's a whole part of long-term learning, because harm reduction is kind of, you know, like a muscle you have to keep working. It's not a one-stop deal. And, you know, overall, we just wanted to end some cycles of like hopelessness and helplessness for people through shifting to these new ways of doing our work and such. So that's where the shift was really, these were our goals for the shift. So I want to tell you a little story about what it looks like to actually shift. And I know some people like to refer this story before, but this is this gentleman, this is William, and I met William back in 2015. I was joining case meetings for him. I was a complex case manager, you know, get the referral, join the meeting. And I couldn't believe how disparagingly so many different groups were talking about him. So we would have like CHMA at the table, the hospital for his community treatment order, his psychiatrist, you know, maybe a local developmental service that's trying to provide passport. And he was living at a homes for special care. Those are homes that are usually run through the Ministry of Health. And it just every meeting was about what was wrong with him. The fact that he was drinking, that's really the whole conversation, is how do you get him to stop to drink? How do you stop him from drinking? Nobody talked about, you know, what he had been through. And so I got to know William and try to understand more about William than what was just being presented to me through these partners. So William had an incredibly difficult childhood, and I won't go into the details of his trauma because he was intensely private about it. But it was very serious. He had, you know, these traumas happened at a young age. He had a very unstable home. His mother also had an intellectual disability and schizotypal disorder, and William himself had an intellectual disability and a concurrent disorder of schizophrenia, and then again a substance use disorder of alcoholism. So he had been using alcohol, he told me, since he was about 9, chronically homeless since he was 12. He would tell me he was the best teacher when it came to all things that I did not know about what it's like to live without a home, what it's like to be marginalized, what it's like to panhandle for your food. You know, some of the things he would say I would find shocking, only because I'd never been part of that world. And he would say, you know, Jill, the best way to stave off hunger when you're on the street is like alcohol and orange juice. He says that's the best trick, man. And so I really listened to those things and trying to understand what was important to him. So how did we shift? How did we get the shift going for William? Well, it took, I think it was about 6 different agencies, a whole bunch of people, a couple kitchen sinks, and it was super messy because nobody had done this before. So I was like, we want to do a housing first approach where he can have housing under the developmental services, and he had ACT team involved. We got the housing from our local, it was called Nipissing Mental Health and Housing Group. They offered free housing for a couple of months to help stabilize. And then further on, the developmental sector agency that was the first to step up and be part of something as risky as this, because everyone thought it was a lot of risk, was CARIS, previously known as Christian Horizons. And I give them a lot of kudos for doing this. And so what happened? Well, you know, luckily everybody agreed, yes, we're gonna make this change. And I can remember these huge boardroom meetings in trying to understand how we were going to support William. I wouldn't need them today because I have all these tools under my belt now. But back then I was still kind of winging it and trying to get everyone involved that I could. So what happened with William was that William got the housing that he wanted with a lot of dignity, a lot of food, because William loved food. In the end, he even had some roommates. So he was living in the end in a group home, for a better lack of the word. So shared accommodations with some other dudes. And guess what? He still drank every day. But here's an example of, you know, real harm reduction and community action and person-centeredness at work. So when the police showed up one day at the group home saying, like, you know, William is, you know, seems to be really drunk and like walking into traffic at this time of day. We're worried about him, you know, and the panhandling and such. Like, how can we fix this? The plan came about on how William could panhandle at certain times, and this is with William involved, like he's sitting there listening and being part of this, and he's like, okay, well, you know, if I go from like 11 till 2, then, and then I come home and drink, then I probably won't be walking on the roads, and that might be safer. And that was the plan, and William was safer, and the police didn't, you know, fuss over the fact that he was still asking for money. And, you know, William and his staff would work all the time about, you know, percentages of alcohol and kind of where William can maintain a good life and the life that he wanted, while substance use was still part of his life. And for us to think that William was going to become abstinence-based, I mean, William was in his late 30s when I met him. He had been drinking since he was 12, was ridiculous. It was nonsensical to think that. And so William, this is a picture of William on one of the camping trips that he did. His reflection was, you know, at first really scary. At first, it was really scary for him to be part of this new service because he was so used to the way he had been treated before. So he's very skeptical on how we were going to do this. But he was pretty satisfied with his life in the end. So much so that at one point, the North Bay police were on him all the time. They had known him his whole life. So they were constantly like, you know, hey, William, what are you doing? You know, his whole life. And so at one point, the police reported back that they had stopped him because, you know, that's what they do. Hey, William, what are you doing? And he says, oh, you don't have to worry about me anymore. You don't have to worry about me anymore. I have a new family now. They're called Christian Horizons, and we're all good now. And I thought that was a beautiful reflection of how what William thought and felt about his new life, you know, with Christian Horizons. So William died. William passed away. William passed away only, I think he was in his 3rd year off of being off the streets. He passed away in his home, the home that Christian Horizons Cares had helped him make for himself, respectfully in his own bed. And then he had quite a beautiful service with family and people who had known him, and it really, to me, just demonstrated how much dignity that he could be afforded, even at death and afterwards. And this is really what shifting was about. And so, like I said, when I met these other ladies who I couldn't seem to get people to shift. Alcohol seemed to be a less scary thing than what crack or meth or fentanyl was presenting. And so I was still looking for how do we shift? But William inspired me. William keeps me motivated, and as does most of the people I've met. But I always like to share William's story because he really kicked things off in our. So I'm just going to end the show there for a second. Any reflection on William's story and what you heard, or maybe similarities of things that you've tried to support over the years, or maybe try to support and were you know faced with barriers? Gabby. Oh, your mic's on, or your mic's off. Sorry, mute.
Sorry, I was just gonna ask, you were saying that William had roommates. I'm just curious, were they already living there when he moved, or did they come after? Like, were
Yeah.
they people that were, they came after? Just wondering if that was
Yeah.
more helpful to figure out people that would fit with him versus him trying to fit in.
That's exactly how it worked, because cohabitation is almost necessary for us to keep people alive and housed, because we just don't have the money for everybody to live in their independent. Plus, there are opportunities for connection and in cohabitation that I think we undervalue still sometimes in trying to move away from institutional life. But so what happened was initially, and it's a funny story, he's offered this big 3-bedroom townhouse because that's what Nipissing Mental Health had, right? And so I remember, and just himself. So I move him into this townhouse on the first day. Like, he's in there and he's like, "This is too big. What am I going to do with all this?" totally freaked out. And I was like, bing, my first learning, like, of course he's freaked out. Like he was really concerned about having this big space, and he doesn't know we're going to help him maintain it. He doesn't have that information yet. He hasn't lived that experience. And then we introduced one roommate who also was a substance user. Also another gentleman I was trying to get out of a homes for special care because they were just their actions were more abusive than helpful. And then they moved the two of them into another home with a third gentleman who had no substance use. He was could be described as someone who's on the spectrum. And they all got along pretty good. They all cared about each other. The two people who were living with addiction were super supportive, and then yet could be super dramatic at sometimes too. There, that was just the continuum of their lives. Yeah, so that's how they did it. It was like one person at a time. And people had to be kind of willingly part of that too, right? Like, so it was about, do you want to live here? Does this work for you, and such? Deanna.
Can't tell you how amazing this conversation is. So when you do this work and you think this way, you feel like you're alone. So I feel like I'm got a big hug right now, but I want to share with you, we have someone we're supporting who is a victim of domestic human trafficking, who is an active drug user. And we have been very person-centered around the idea that this individual, this is their language, this is their coping, this is their trauma. Some of the barriers we faced is being in a unionized environment where we had to protect our staff. So this individual really loved crack, loved to smoke it, and we had to try to find ways for them to access it, but not in the home. Put the staff at risk, their health at risk, because that was something that was really big. So how have you navigated that? We also actually Ubered this individual to a safe injection site when they wanted to use. And when we would actively Uber wherever it needed to happen. But this was not an easy process. A lot of discussion, a lot of work with the staff, and a lot of training to get people on board, because this shift is a great title, because there is a shift, and you want people to not be on drugs, because that just seems easier. But we don't realize that, eventually, or maybe not ever, they will come off, and we have to work with them.
Yeah. And there's like big pots of work for us to do. So the first one is, how do we help with housing first, with harm reduction, and implementing that within the developmental sector is part of why we were running around with the shift to say, you can do this, it's evidence-based. You think it's scary, it's not as scary as you think once you start learning, opening up your mind, listening to people who can share their stories like Justin, and understanding that these are human beings, they're not from Mars. This is it. So what the continuum of what that looks like in our sector, Dina, in regards to people accessing illegal drugs while in service is really wide and far. So you've got some agencies that are like, as soon as it becomes an illegal drug, we'll drop them from service. They don't want to have anything to do with it. They don't want liability. They don't want it's like, okay, they can smoke marijuana, they can drink alcohol, even though alcohol is like, super damaging. But we don't want illegal stuff happening. So your approach in regards to accessing other service or places where they can do that, which is hard sometimes for crack, because I think there's only one inhalation site, I think it's in Vancouver, that you can go at. So I'll tell you, Kenora Community Living, and these are the people that we work with a lot, because they're leaders in this area. So here's the other end of the continuum. So you've got like, nope, no one is not going to give you service, to Kenora actually created like a safe injection site right on one of their properties. And what they did was they put the drugs outside of the physical property where the person could access it, but the staff would have a key to provide them access to it. And the first time she overdosed, the staff, of course, had a meltdown, because they're like, we did it. We opened the box. We caused her overdose. And Dr. Johnny, who actually Justin and I were talking with yesterday, who's an outreach doctor from Kenora, came in and flipped their brains around and said, "What are you talking about? You just saved her. You did not try to kill her. You tried to save her." And because they were there to provide her the naloxone at the time. And so these are the conversations that have to be open. We have to look to people who have had this experience. We have to build resource, and that's one of the reasons Jennifer's involved. We're trying to build resource across our communities. We need more nurses involved. We need more practitioners who understand how to do harm reduction and present it and help the frontline staff, right? But then we also need to listen to the frontline staff. Because for the same reason, when we were doing deinstitutionalization, and the groups that were coming out of the institution at that time, all about high behaviors was their label. People were like, "I don't do this. I'm not working in a place where someone's going to hit me or someone's going to throw TV or, you know." It's very similar in us trying to get past that. So, we could probably go till noon, guys, but I know we have till 11. So I want to move some. Justin, you go ahead while I pull up the slides, start chatting.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, the language of drug addiction too is like what you're listening to the addict, right? The underlying reason for all of this is trauma. Like, all addiction is born of this inability to connect to oneself. No one would stick needles in their arms or smoke crack for enjoyment because it's a good time. It's not a good time, it's just a way to distract. So that's kind of a way you can talk about these things when we're allowing somebody to do these things. We're not really allowing anyone, but we're letting them make their own choices. It's because they're using this as a way to mask the symptoms. And I use drugs with a lot of people with intellectual disabilities, and the medication that they put those individuals on is heavy. And a lot of the individuals that I use drugs with that were on that, they said that the prescribed medication was far worse than the illegal drugs because the way it would react with the nervous system. So they didn't want to take it, which is why the illegal drugs were working in the first place. It was the pharmaceutical. Now, it looks different because it's illegal, but it works with the nervous system. Some, not with fentanyl, because fentanyl is just the worst, but that's kind of one of the reasons they're doing it.
So we don't have much time left because everybody's been talking, and that's great because we really would prefer a more interactive group. But I want to go through some of the main principles that we use within the shift and what we're anchoring on in regards to evidence-based. So don't have time to watch this video. I'll send the slideshow though along to you guys without my notes, and you can like share it internally and to everybody that's available today. But you know what, you know, it sounds like most of this group understands what harm reduction is, right? So it's evidence-based, it's client-centered, it's seeks to reduce, you know, health and social harms. It is not, you know, harm reduction versus treatment. That's the political sound bites. Don't get involved in that. Harm reduction is one pillar of the national drug kind of approach for Canada, along with treatment, along with prevention. And so, and the other thing that harm reduction is, and Justin mentioned it before, and I'm becoming braver and braver as I move on, is harm reduction is love. And I encourage you to watch this video that I'll send along because that's really what it is. So going back to some, you know, the words, like, you know, it's about pragmatism, human values, it focuses on harms. It's so much more than just needle exchange. It's about a taxi trip to a safe place. It's about an open door. It's about letting people know that you're going to be along their side in the journey. It really is more than just clean needles. And like I said, this is evidence-based. This is, you know, Health Canada's the pillars. And we know, even though there's a lot of talk about forced treatment, that doesn't work. We have a whole history of that not being effective. And such why harm reduction is there to help save lives and provide dignity to people. One of the things I wanted to chat about is when you listen to William's story, this is all about housing first. And housing first, again, you can Google it, huge history, lots of research done on this. And it's really saying that, as this picture says, if you're homeless this is kind of the way it's working right now. You go into a shelter, you know, you're supposed to get some of these services, medical, mental, behavioral, and then you go into transitional, and then you're supposed to get some of these services. And there's always fail points, as you guys mentioned at the beginning, between these areas. So for what worked for William and what we really promote moving forward is that you become permanent, like you get a home like the rest of us. And then you work on those things that become then part of life stability. The way we've broken it up in our system with shelters and transitional is not really effective for people, and they really do kind of fall through the cracks. So sure, the transitional home gets to say, check it off, they did their 2 years, we found them a house. Then they get out in their house and they destroy it, and you know, or don't have any support to maintain it, and are evicted within 2 to 3 months. So this is the real world realities. And the other thing we know is that it's actually saves money. So if you're talking to people who hold our purse strings, it's actually a huge investment in long-term savings for services. I'm not going to go too much into this because we've only got about 15 minutes left. But I'm just going to end the show here. Are any of you familiar with when we're working with people with drug use, the stages of change in regards to how a person moves through? And it's, I never say it right, but it's Pushka and Declemente. You can Google this, stages of change. And basically it's about understanding where the person is within their drug use journey or addiction journey. And I really encourage you to use this as one of the tools of like, what do we do when someone is in full drug use? What do we do when someone is in pre-contemplation, they call it, as in, you know, I'm not really thinking about it. What do we do when we do contemplation, which is a period in the stage of change where it's like, I'm thinking about it. There's a role for us in each of those. It's well laid out. And when we look at our person-centered models, you can really see how it fits into all of that. So that was one of the first things I brought to DS. I said, listen, when you think you don't have anything to do because that person is out there actively using and trying to disengage with service, we have a lot to do. This is where harm reduction comes in. This is where maintaining connection is so important. Not saying I haven't seen that person for 3 days, they're no longer on my caseload. This is integral. There's things for us to do in that. What do we do when the person is you know, making some actions for change? What is our role? And the more you know that person, the better you can get at detailing those parts. And then as a person moves through the stages of change, which means maybe they've gone from, you know, not using for a while and then they start using again, we start seeing where we are actually effective in helping that person rather than just going, there's nothing we can do. Okay. The other thing is important when you're having conversations about drug use is to understand where they are on the continuum of drug use. So there's a big difference, and this was happening especially early on in my work, where everyone was writing things like, this person is addicted to, I don't know, marijuana. And I'd be like, are they actually addicted to it? Oh no, well, you know, they smoke every weekend. Wait a second. That's not an addiction. And I'm not sure, like that's a social use. Like, so there's a whole range of why when people are using drugs. And I'm not saying that it's good or bad. And I think that's one of the biases we have to understand. We get caught up in like, oh no, they're using this, they're going to use this next. And like Justin will tell you, yes, that is what happens. But instead of us getting caught up in trying to stop something, we have to get caught up in connecting with that person. And the very simple, as Justin's saying, is how can they connect with themselves? How can we help with that? Right. So when people say, I'll meet people and they'll be like, I really like to see my father. Bing. Okay, let me see how I can help you with that. Any type of connections that they are yearning for, that's my job. That's definitely my job to help with, and to build more connections so that somewhere along those paths, they can find that love for themselves again, right? And to encourage that piece. So understanding harm reduction, understanding the changes of change, understanding housing first, and understanding the continuum of drug use are all your tools to go forward and say, this can be done. When people say, no, yeah, this can be done. Here's the tools. Here's the practical stuff. And then I'll end with, if you don't have in your heart some love, and not, Justin can spend 20 minutes talking about that love is not about sexuality. It's not about all the things that we see on TV. If you don't truly value people and see their gifts within them, you're going to be challenged in doing this work. And the last piece is self-care. Justin and I were spending some time with a doctor yesterday who talked about burning out by doing this work. Why? Because he wasn't practicing the same things we should be telling people. Self-love, self-care, you're important to you, you can have a boundary, all of those issues, right? So it was a real full circle moment for me to hear that from Dr. Johnny A. Justin about, you know, we're all just human, right? Or this is all going to affect us. So it is hard work. And we have to validate that for the people who are going to be out there every day doing it. And how do we support people with that? So we got 10 minutes. I would rather hear from you guys than talk anymore. What can we leave with? And I'm going to, like I said, I'll send the slideshow out that has like the connection to the shift training where we talk about this more. We're going to be doing a couple shift gatherings this year in the north, but we'd like to have some in the south soon, eh, Jennifer? Yeah, so we've got 2 going on up north this in October. We've got over 200 people coming to both of them. We're very excited. So we'd love to bring some down south, and because you can imagine how really necessitates people getting together and chat and talking about this and building again more connections. You want people from all those other community partners so you can say, hey, as you're saying, these are my peeps, Jenna. Oh, I got people who are thinking like me. I think we can actually make some change. All right, I'll leave it at that and open it up for you guys. Tammy.
Hi, thanks, Jill. I'm just wondering the training that's available online, the different modules. I just want to confirm those can be done at your own pace, right? You could just do them when you want. And also they're based on your line of work, right? How you support people?
Yes. Sorry, Tammy, you did want to hear some more detail about that.
No, that's okay. That's all right. The link, is it in the, should I post the link or is it in the?
If you already have the link and you can post it, that would be great.
Okay.
Go ahead and post it. So on that site, you will find the training and you will also find our initial toolkit, which is kind of toolkit / white paper, everything we wanted to put into talking about all of this. There are 4 parts of the online training. It's all free, by the way. The first part is our foundation, sounds like you guys have foundational about harm reduction, about understanding biased, the values of the work. Then we have a particular course for developmental direct support workers, which reminds them about some of their person-centered tools that they can implement into this work, but also focuses a bit more on harm reduction and, again, bias. Then we have a cross-sector section, which I send when I'm working in community partnership, and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, hey, take this training. It's going to only take you about an hour. Maybe you'll learn something. And then we have a leadership for those who are in leadership and management, for those of you who are like, I am legally responsible for those staff safety. I understand that we are so how do you look at identifying your risk? How do you, create some of those tools that we need for accountability? All of that is in there too. So, and even organizational change. How do you what do you need to think about to organizationally, shift everything? Okay. Amy?
Yeah, thank you, Jill, and thank you, Justin. That was really, really helpful. I just wanted to add sort of one of the challenges that wasn't mentioned in my area of developmental services, which is case management, is that there's so much pressure to close people quickly because there's so many people on the waiting list. And I thought it was really helpful what you were saying, Jill, about the need for building relationships, right? And the awareness that people might be out of touch for a bit and then they'll get back in touch, because what we experience is, oh, you haven't heard from them? Close them. Oh, you haven't heard from them? They're not working on their goals. They're not engaged. So you should close them. And so I think that language you gave, and also you're right about the stages of change, is really, really helpful for me in terms of just that pushing back a little bit and saying, actually, the goal is to build a relationship and then work on the other goals. That's what we're working on right now.
Exactly. So, and then you can say, well, and if you tell me to close, I guess I won't be doing that, right? So yeah, and I would get that, some of that pushback too, but these are not like, we all want to, or at least our bureaucracy wants us to work in like 12-month sections, 4-month sections, 6-month section. This is years of work, years. This is not, someone just doesn't pop off, get treatment, and like, away they go. This has to be a full commitment, and so I appreciate you saying that, Amy. Any other questions or final thoughts, questions for Justin? He takes any question. Don't be shy.
I'm just gonna jump in and just,
Yeah.
remind everyone and really just thank everyone for what you do. Like, this job is not done for a paycheck. Like, I mean, there has to be some sort of compassion that goes into this. Deanna, like, you sound exactly like a Jill, and I'm sure that everyone in here is on the same wavelength. So, as an individual who is facing all this, this is kind of what change can look like, right? Like, the things that I do in my life today, I help so many people, and people looked at me and with labels, and they had all these kind of ideas about me. I never fit in a box ever, and I was never going to be anything. And with a little bit of love and kindness and compassion, and people just seeing me as a human, and me being able to see myself as a human, I've changed my entire reality, which has really changed my world. So I just kind of want you to know that there is another side to this. I know it's hard to watch what's going on, because there's very little that does seem to break through, but this is what we're doing. We're creating something that can be better.
Thank you, Justin. Yeah, Deanna?
One of the challenges that we have found is we would love to have mentors like you, Justin, and other individuals to come together and not feel isolated and alone, because they have the clinical and the care around them, but they need to talk to their peers. So is there something that exists? We've tried, we've had some challenges, just people, are struggling and doing that, but is this something that you've done or you're thinking about doing? Like, just your thoughts around that piece.
Yes, and because those are all like good practices that people with lived experience tell us that is helpful, right? So we're like, well, then it's our job to get them together, right? If they're telling us that. I think some of the issues that I've encountered is that, and I'm just gonna be really frank with this, is that everyone I keep meeting up with the exception of Justin, is still so deep into the blackness that they're not ready to start sharing with others. They're not ready to be the voice of this. They have so much shame still too. I've approached ladies who I've worked with and said, can I talk about your story? And they're like, no, it's like embarrassing. It's shameful. It's not, I'm like, but you've shared so many gifts for us. Nope, they don't, that's not their interest. So, this is all about connections. I connected with Justin, like someone, hey, want to invite this guy to this shift training, kind of like this I was doing in community living Mattawa. I didn't even know who Justin was. The manager said he's a good dude. I'm like, okay, show up in the meeting, let's see what happens. So you got to be a little brave too. But I don't think we just need to say that it has to be a person with an intellectual disability, and that I think it's like anybody who can help connect us. Is it a family member? Is it someone like Justin who maybe doesn't have a disability but has had that lived experience? Yeah. And I think the last thing I want to say to that is there's some long-term work that I'm hoping to work with Jennifer in Surrey Place about, that would look towards those things, like clinically, how are our practices set up in order to support those models. Yeah.
I just want to throw in,
Justin.
I also have I'm putting my own thing together. It's called Affliction by Addiction. It's a company that's unrolling right now. We're going to try and implement it within these programs, so it will be a resource tool that the government can access. So I can be approached, and we can have a group setting where you can come with these ideas, you can come with these thoughts, we can get people in a room, we can share these conversations from a lived experience to really inject that into the system. So there's a lot of value in it, right? We can shift the way we're thinking from this perspective as well. So, and it opens up an avenue of communication, right direct to me. Because Jill's right, there's not a lot like me. Like there's only 0.01% that come out of the thing, the situation that I was in, but only 0.001% that are talking about it this way. So it is a unique thing, but we're trying to turn it into something more that we can access.
Darian?
Thank you so much. I just wanted to ask Justin. Justin, I support a large team of clinicians who, in turn, they support individuals in active addiction and their homelessness as well. Is there anything from from your standpoint, that anything that you could have heard from a clinician, someone you met, is there any like we continue to say the same thing, like we understand, we say things like, I understand this is your situation. So is there any advice, anything that you wish you had heard from folks that you've met in a supporting role that would have made a difference, or could have helped?
Well, I think unknowingly they just showed me kindness and compassion through the display of seeing me as a human. They didn't know me, like, and people just sometimes smiled at me. They just saw me in a dark moment and they offered me light. And I think that goes a lot further, but we've got to break down the title of or the authoritative figure that is sort of being approaching. So if you lead from a place of human experience or like vulnerability, right? If somebody's in a low vibrational state, and they're sad, they're angry, they're frustrated, share an experience from when you were sad, you were frustrated, you were experienced. Get rid of the employment, get rid of the title, see the individual, get on the level. This is human connection. This is authentic human connection, because that's what we're all craving. But there's this barrier. Like we can feel and see that there's care trying to be implemented, but it's like, you don't know me, man. You got no idea who I am. You don't know what I've been through. But if you're like, hey man, look, like my dad left when I was a kid. Like I do know what it's like to suffer, man, like and feel some pain. Like I've been on your level. I'm trying to understand you, but I want you to understand me too. That is power. That's real. But honestly, man, kindness, compassion, and sometimes that looks like giving somebody space and just being seen and being heard. That was key as well. Somebody who'd see me and hear me, for me, huge harm reduction.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I kind of knew how Justin was going to answer that, because it's one of the questions I asked very early on with Justin, because it is the curious questions, like, and it's not like maybe a magic wand question, but it was like, what's effective? Like, we keep putting this out, but like, what, as a person who lived, what was effective? And I'm, not that I don't know what I was expecting. He goes, oh yeah, kindness and compassion. I'm like, oh good, thank God I'm doing that. But simplicity through complexity, right? So again, we get these labels of complexity. There's some simple stuff. The other thing Justin always says, like when someone approaches you and comes to your office and they are high and they are maybe a little dysregulated, I'm like, what's the best thing you can do? He's like, give them some water and some food. Like simple, right? And that kindness and compassion on top of it. Listen, you guys are all very much kindred peeps. I think we could have spent all day together going through some of this more and I'm sorry I didn't get through all the slides, but I really did just appreciate the conversation, because I feel like that again validates what we're doing. Get in there and look at the shift. Email me. I'm available for anything. If you want Justin and I've got some other super amazing colleagues that also do some co-presenting. Christopher Jordan Stevens will come in and like just blow you away about housing first. You want us to come and speak to anybody, any of your groups, your boards, your management teams, please just reach out. We'd love to help spread the message.
So I want to thank you from the bottom, all circles of the heart here, Jill and Justin. We will be in touch for more presentations. I think we are desperate, and feel very, very thankful for the two of you and the work that you've done, and a deep, deep respect. So we've recorded this, but we will ask you to come back. I guarantee it. We'll be asking in minutes, and Justin will be in touch as well. And thank you. And everyone jump on the shift, take a look. And I'm sure people can reach out if they have questions, Jill.
Absolutely.
Justin, that sort of thing.
Totally. Justin and I even like, we'll pop in, like we had a call I think it was last week, Justin, oh, the person I'm supporting is starting to use fentanyl. And we're there to validate, reduce fear, connect, give love to everyone in that situation. And so yeah, we're if we're available, we jump on, eh? And Justin seems to be always available. I think there's 4 of them, but but
You can use me as a resource. Like I should have slammed my email in there, but you got some of my social links. So just
Yeah.
message me if something's going on. We can work it out.
Amazing. Justin, where are you in BC?
I'm up in like the shoe swap. So I live like between Vernon and Kamloops, but we live in like the mountains. So I'm moving back to Vancouver because I started this other affliction by addiction company because Vancouver, obviously, we know has a big thing going on. And I'm going to really get this whole city behind me. I've made some wonderful connections there, and I'm really getting involved in the Indigenous culture. And I really just, me, it's all about evolution and just bringing us all together. So I've got a really good ability in getting into very difficult places. So I'm
Wonderful.
being able to do that. So yeah.
Appreciate
I
you.
think we'll see Justin on national TV soon.
Ah,
We will. I'm telling you, I'm
Absolutely.
gonna wake up and see you on CTV Morning one morning. I know it, because people just can't help but that wanna hear more and be part. So yeah, thank you for letting us be here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
thank you.
Okay, have a good Friday, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend.
Uh,
Take care of yourselves.
Absolutely.
Lots of love.
Bye, Jill. Ciao, ciao. Thank you.
Bye. See you, Justin.